Alright, so in this video I want to make a program to move the servo motor. Here's my servo motor here. I've just taken it and added this little thing here. It's just a little plastic thing. Now these servo motors only turn through 180 degrees. So don't think like a wheel spinning around and around. Think instead like something that would open and shut something. And you could also use it as a scanner, like to scan something. Turn something through 180 degrees, searching for something, whatever. So there's our thing. Now, don't be scared about this. It's just a digital output. Now, the cable, you'll see there's no black on there, but brown. The brown cable, the dark brown cable, that's our black cable. So I'm just going to plug this into my digital thing here. I'm going to plug it into number 8. Now, if you look at my code, I've already done just a little bit. I've named the pin 0 with my dial, because I'm going to use a dial here. The dial I'm going to turn, and that's going to control my servo. So I've just done an initialize of that. I've also named a variable, just val for value. That's initially going to be the value for my dial here. Okay, so just got through that to get us started. Now, if you want to run a servo, you're going to have to come up to Sketch, include a library, and you can see that there's a bunch of libraries here. Now we should be able to see our servo library. Now if I click that, you can see that it says hash include servo.h. Servo.h is sort of like the driver for this, and it also adds some commands to our code here so that we can start using our servo as well. When you start dealing with more complicated things like servos, LCD displays, ultrasonic sensors, you need to include a library inside of your sketch. So that's just what I've done there. Okay, so now we need to create our servo. So servos work a little bit differently. We're going to create an object called servo, and we're just going to call it my servo. So servo, my servo. So we've named create servo object called my servo. And we'll be able to refer to the servo as my servo throughout our program. Pretty straightforward. Now that's really it for this top section. We've included a library. We've created an object called my servo. We've initialized our dial at 0. And we've also created a variable called value. Now, if you're really thinking, you're probably going to say, wait a minute, we've initialized a dial at analog 0, but what we haven't done is initialize our servo at, wherever I put it, digital 8. And you're probably thinking we need to do another initialize here with our servo at 8. Because this is a slightly more complicated thing, and because it's requires this program to run, we actually need to put our initialization in the setup. So if you think about it, your Arduino turns on, it runs the servo thing, and only then can it start dealing with these things. So we need to attach the servo. So first we're going to talk about our object, my servo, and then we're going to attach it. Now, where am I attaching it? I'm attaching it to 8. So I'm attaching it to digital 8 here. That should be attach my servo to digital pin 8. Cool. So that's the only bit of setup we've got to do now. So think about what we've done. We've attached our servo program. We've initialized our dial at analog 0. We've created a variable called val that will be able to monitor how we're turning this thing, and then inside of the setup code we've attached our servo to pin 8. Now we need to do our main loop here, our main code. So the first thing we need to do is figure out what our val is equal to. Now our val is going to be equal to the analog read of our dial. Okay, so set val to be the read of our dial. And you should remember that our dial will read anything from 0 to 1023 as I turn through it. 0, 1023. So as I turn that, that's going to set our value to those specific values. Now, problem. Okay, this does not take values of 0 to 1023. This only takes values from 0 to 179. So there we've got a problem. Okay, so it goes to, I think it's 0 to 179. It might be 1 to 180. Whatever. It takes values from there to there. So somehow we need to control this with inputs of 0 to 1023 and control this 0 to 180 or 1 to 180, something like that. So we're going to use this great function called the map function. We're going to map those numbers 0 to 1023 to these numbers 1 to 180. Okay, so map, fantastic. Now map, what am I mapping? Well, I'm mapping the val. So we need to say what variable we're mapping. We're mapping the value, which is the analog read of this, from 0 to 1023. So that's the from. We're mapping from the dial 0 to 1023. And what are we mapping it to? We're mapping it to some new values, 1 to 180, which is our servo. So that's going to like transfer 0 to 1023 to 1 to 180. Okay, so it's like the numbers 1 to 3 will be 1, and the numbers 3 to 6 will be 2. It's doing this mapping. Okay, so map dial to servo. Now I haven't quite finished there because I'm going to do something that's going to sort of play with your mind a little bit. The value is equal to the analog read of the dial. But then I'm also going to use that value and change that value. So now I've said that the value initially in our first line of code is equal to the value of our dial. And then in the second line of code I've said actually the value is actually going to be equal to the mapping of that value from 0 to 1023 to 1 to 180. We could actually use two variables here. We could map value to something else, but we're going to use the same variable throughout. Now after that, it's pretty straightforward. It's going to be my servo, and we're going to write to my servo. What are we going to write to my servo? Well, we're going to write that new val, that 0 to 180 val. Oh, saw a thingy I missed. Write the val to the servo. Okay, and then I'm just going to put a little delay in here. Because this is going to keep looping back on itself. It's going to constantly read this and do this. I'm just going to give it like a small delay before it comes back and loops back on itself. So instead of reading this instantaneously, like every millisecond, I'll set it to read it every, I don't know, 20 milliseconds or something like that. Delay, 20. Set a small delay before reading values. Alright, that should be it. Just make sure I'm plugged in right. 0, I'm plugged into 8, 0, 8. Okay, now I've learned my mistake. I need to upload properly here. Upload. I better save it. I'm just going to save this to my desktop and call it servo dial rotator. Uploading. Did you think I was going to get it right the first time? I've missed that. Okay, so it said it expected an initializer there. Okay, let's try that again. Com error. Don't forget to plug it in. Alright, so it's uploaded. Let's test her out. So here's my knob here. You can see that rotating, hopefully. There's a small problem. When I get to the end, hopefully you can hear that motor like buzzing. It's getting stuck and it's trying really hard to go further than it should. Now, if you think about that, you probably know why that is. I've set my values incorrectly. Instead of doing 1 to 180, I probably should have done 0 to 179. So let's try fixing that. That's my gut instinct. I could be wrong. Okay, so we can try this one more time. Still buzzing. Okay, that's interesting. Not happy with that. You can map values to whatever you want. So I'm going to map 0 to 175. Maybe I'll even map 5 to 175. Now this just means that my servo won't go through quite the 0 to 180. But it's probably going to be better than this buzzing sound. Okay, so it's going, you can see it's not going quite through its full 180 degrees, but I've gotten rid of that buzzing noise. Now you guys can experiment with that and you can come up with exactly the right mapping that will maximize your movement but will not get that grinding, because otherwise you're going to chew up your gears. Okay, a couple of things you've learned here. You've learned how to attach your servo, you've learned how to use one of those libraries, the servo library, and you've also learned how to map values from one value to another. Now, interestingly, you could set this so that you could turn the dial fully, but the servo would only go like a quarter of a turn. So you could map 5 to 95, and your servo would only go through a quarter of a turn. That might be handy as well. Let's set that back. Alright, that's it guys. Thanks a lot. That's servos, that's mapping, that's libraries.